Hello, folks. Welcome to our sponsor session with Stout Tanks. I have Don Marcil here and Mike Paladino, who seems like some of you folks know them already. Before they take it away from me, I just want to remind everyone, pop your questions in that Ask a Question area down in the bottom of the screen. We'll get to as many of those as we can after the presentation concludes. So here's the floor to Mike and Don.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Mike from Stout Tanks and Kettles. We've got about 16 years of professional brewing experience. I've been in the industry a little over 20 years, so hopefully we can share some of our thoughts with you and go through a checklist today. Don, introduce yourself.
Yeah. Similar to Mike, I spent some time out in the Pacific Northwest, about a decade brewing out here, and then with Stout for now 4 years. So seen a lot, and hopefully continue on that path and be able to be involved in the beer industry for a long, long time. But happy to be able to talk about this with y'all.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about a checklist. Working on a checklist that most brewers will ask us, what do you got to do to open a brewery? So we're going to go through some things that we've thought out, and hopefully there'll be some good information where you can use to prepare yourself for opening a brewery and being a successful brewer. Let's get on here. Phase 1, the dream and the plan. Concept, business plan, educating yourself. Don, want to take the mic from here?
So in the process of making this, we tried to break it up into a few different phases, but it all starts with a dream and a plan. And a lot of times that dream can be so big that it's hard to compress into like some smaller kind of bullet points or some direction that will get you through to accomplishing what you need to. So what we have here initially with the concept that is a huge thing that people kind of overlook is, who are you making the beer for? A lot of times we come in thinking we're going to just brew the beers that we like. Knowing who you're brewing for is a huge important part of it, and also knowing how it's going to work as a business is probably the secondary part of that as well. So once you get that idea together, you're going to really kind of focus on the strength of what makes you unique, what makes you stand out. A lot of times we talk about that as filling a market segment, but it also is just, maybe there is a particular niche that you're going to fill in your market, and maybe it could be that you're a lager-focused beer brewery, maybe you're a sours, but all in all, you just have to kind of like know what your desire is to create, because this is the stepping stones for getting that brewery up and running. And then the last part of the concept bullet points that we have is building your brand around something that you care about. And I've seen this many times. I've seen, especially out here in the Pacific Northwest, I worked for a brewery that was very bike centric. So everything was kind of centered around an outdoor lifestyle in biking, and then there was others that were, rock climbing and others, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an outdoor thing, but I've even seen it based off of music. And it's not that you have to do this, but that if you do want to do it, it's going to give you the ability to kind of craft that brand and craft that image. And I've seen that many a times, and it really helps, because if you're passionate about not only the brewery, but this other secondary theme, it's going to show in what you're doing.
Sure. I think identity is really kind of a part of what the initial concept is. Forming the identity of what you are envisioning is going to help you kind of move forward with the next step of the business plan.
Getting into the business plan is the nitty gritty. It's not necessarily the most fun part of it, but it is very important these days. Especially, you can't just jump into this without having some sort of an idea as to the operation estimates, what kind of a expected profit and loss, who's doing what. These are all very important things, and it needs to be really spelled out well at the very beginning. We have the be conservative there. It's the data that you're working with, if you skew that data, it doesn't do you any good. I'd rather see that somebody's on the conservative end and using data that is a little bit lower in projection than the higher end, because you can always adjust for that. But if you come in with very inflated numbers, the chances are that you can't make an adjustment on the run with that. How much beer do you need to sell to support your vision and to support the business and you financially? Very important thing. A lot of people think that that immediately they're going to be quitting their day jobs, they're going to be running this brewery, and for 1 or 2 employees, maybe that is possible. But especially when you have multiple business partners, you can't have everyone just up and quit their day job and think that a brewery that's doing a few hundred barrels is going to be able to support them. It takes a while for that business to mature.
Sure.
And as well, knowing your business partners and what everyone is responsible for. One of the most common setups is that I see, and it's usually quite successful, is one business person, one brewer. They kind of overlap in the middle a little bit, but really know their segments and know them strong. Mike, did I miss anything in there?
No, I think you hit it all pretty well there. I know the educating yourself is something I've really, stressed a lot about with brewers, is to, reach out to other brewers, reach out to guilds and brewer association and other, aspects to kind of really see what, where you want to fit in, and this way you can say, hey, is this identity that I'm looking for, do I fit in here? Is this good for me? Brew pub, distribution brewery, mixture of the two. It's amazing how much resources there really is out there. Stuff like NanoCon right now, where we're able to, do this, and everybody is here is educating themselves. So this is really, really good first step for everyone here.
Yeah. And on the local level, you have some brewers guilds. On the national level, you have Brewers Association. Many of these associations have brewery and planning. That is something that you should check into. So, yeah, we're trying to keep the pace here.
Sure, yeah. Phase 2, the paperwork, the really fun part of opening your brewery and your business. Some of the things that this is kind of the checklist. I think a lot of people need to, think about protecting, the important identity that you want to create. If you want to have a certain identity, it's probably something that you want to get protection of. The legal portion of that is, going to getting a lawyer. Make sure you do have a really good lawyer, and reach out the brewers guilds or some of those local things. Fellow brewers can advise and say, hey, this is a good person who knows this industry. Again, working with your community really, really helps.
Yeah, this is one of those sections where it falls underneath that measure twice, cut once. You want to make sure that you really have set this up properly, because once you've signed those papers, once you've set things up, it's very hard to untangle that as you've created this identity, as you've created these agreements. So it's important to get a good lawyer, I think. In the long run, I think it saves you money. Next section is talking about the capital. A lot of people have gone through many different types of capital raising. We have SBA loans, which are very common. They currently do take a decent amount of time and involve a lot of patience. Standard bank loans, if you happen to have a good relationship with your bank, you may be able to do something along those lines. City improvement grants, if you have an area of a city that is maybe depressed, that the city wants to kind of revitalize, a lot of times you can find inexpensive real estate or maybe tax incentives that can take you to the next level with getting a good opportunity off the ground. And then the very last one is credit card. I don't necessarily know it's the best idea, but it's not unheard of. I've heard people who have done it. Maybe if you were doing a very small brewery, like a bootstrap brewery, but really if you do that, you have to really have a good plan and make sure that you know that you're not going to get stuck with that for the rest of your life. Sure. There's a lot of expense there that could balloon if you put it on a credit card. Most banks are going to want to see a certain amount of money up front. I think 10 to 20% is pretty normal, depending on the size of the deal. And then the other thing is, if you have outside investors, and there's more capital involved, there's more people involved, this could get to be a very interesting part because there could be a power dynamic. There could also be, kind of resentment amongst others, especially if it wasn't established at the beginning, the roles that everyone is taking, like we said on the other side, that someone is not pulling their fair share. So having all of that very well spelled out at the beginning, important. And if you are going to have a good amount of investors, really having it spelled out is huge.
The property is one thing that I think a lot of people will focus a lot on the equipment and then go look for a property. There's tends to be sometimes a cart and a horse thing on that, because I've talked to people, you get your business plan, kind of have an idea of really what you want to do. Don't overlook properties at all. You may find a diamond in the rough, and you may be thinking of some 10,000 square foot building, but if you happen to walk by a 2,000 square foot building that is the right place, you may have to just adjust your business plan accordingly and find out that you may be able to open sooner with a smaller concept. But make sure that that property does fit your business plan. Don't try to change that property much more than it is, unless you do have the deepest pockets, and endless pockets, so, and most people don't. But that building is something there. Go ahead, Don.
The property is always a wild card, and
Mm-hmm.
it is the one that comes along and kind of, it can take an entire business and throw it on its head. But that's okay. You just have to kind of roll with the punches. You have to be patient as you're doing your planning. The business of getting real estate at certain times, especially lately, it's been very hard. A lot of people are like, I can't get my lease signed, or they were about ready to get a location, lost the location to someone else. It is probably by far one of the most difficult segments to work with. Once you do find a location, we talk about having, the proper utilities, drainage, floors. Do you have the proper amount of traffic to support your business plan? Do you have parking? Parking's a big one. I've seen where the best brewery could be in a spot that just is inaccessible. And if there's no parking, a lot of times they don't necessarily succeed. If there isn't a lot of parking, are you on a very well traveled strip that people can walk through? These are huge things to consider. Then you take in the building and its geometry. What can fit in this building? A lot of times we're working with vertical space. We're doing stackable tanks, custom work, in order to get a brewery that's going to fit in there. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. People putting their brewery in a manageable space, typically keeping the overhead under control, is a great way to be able to be successful with a smaller brew system.
Yeah.
And then
a big thing I think is making sure once you're agreeing to that property, is to making sure when you're signing that lease that you do have the first right to renewal or right to buy when that lease is ready for its due, because some landlords will get a little bit greedy and they'll kind of start looking for the highest bidder. But making sure you have this checklist, kind of looking at that, can help you prepare for those negotiations. We'll just kind of keep moving so that we're on a decent pace here. The brewing equipment itself, and then the state and federal licensing. Don?
Yeah. So on the brewing equipment, you want to match the equipment to the business plan. Some people will be thinking about how they're going to expand down the line. That is more of a person who has established that they already have a phase outlook. I see that on occasion. It's not always the standard. These are people who maybe, for instance, I had one where they had the adjacent lot and they knew that when they grew, they could blow through a wall, they could put an expansion, and they could grow. Beyond that, I think that just matching the system to that particular building, and knowing that there are other methods to grow. There are satellite breweries, there are production facilities, many others that we've discussed in some of our other talks. But the big thing about matching the equipment to the business plan is you don't want to be stuck paying the bill for a very large system that you are not utilizing to its fullest extent. Beyond that, we're looking at how do you pay for this equipment. So you have the banks, we have A lot of people doing lease to own these days. If you lease to own, you set up the payments over a certain amount of time. You do a $1 buyout at the end, and the equipment's yours. Outside investors as well. For a while there during COVID, banks were very limited in their funds. Outside investors coming in and doing the funding for some breweries that I had worked with. Sorry, the state and federal licenses. So a very important section here. You got to make sure that you file all your paperwork correctly. You don't want to have any mishaps here. Filing with your federal license with the TTB, absolutely important. A lot of times a layout is going to be needed. A lot of times equipment needs to be on order in order to show how you're going to have that beer and how you're going to protect that tax revenue that they want. A lot of times it's showing that the beer can be held in a very secure and safe place. And that's a huge portion of it. On the local level, having a liquor license and paying your brewer's bonds as well. You know, these are ways to secure that for the government, that you are going to be paying your allotted amount for the beer that you're producing. And then the last part is the checking for local regulations. Every state, city, county can have various laws here. I know some people that are actually putting plans together for a county that is actually still dry right now, and they're just waiting for that change to the local municipality. But a lot of things that we take as an assumption can actually not necessarily be the case. So do your homework. Very important part of the process here.
Sure. I think also giving yourself some time for some of those things to be approved as well, and not trying to think that that's going to be something overnight. You're typically working with a state, federal, or local government, and those entities don't tend to work at your pace. They work at their own. So keeping that in mind along the way. Putting it all together. You got the construction, receiving equipment, and going on from there. John?
Yeah, so typically the tap room is going to be your best contact with your customer, and that goes through the majority of the business models that are out there. Obviously, it makes sense that in a brew pub or tap room model, that is, that is your customer facing immediately there. That is the bulk of it. It usually makes up probably half of your square footage in a brew pub that you are putting forth to your customer, because you need the seats in order to make the money. Mm-hmm. Even in a production brewery, it still turns out to be the face of your brewery. It's a place where people can come in and access you where they normally couldn't. A lot of times a small tap room associated with a production facility allows them just to kind of come in and say hi, see what you're about. Very important section that you want to make comfortable for them, so that even if somebody just comes in and gets a 4-pack of cans or a crowler to go, that they look at it and that they say, wow, this is a place I want to come back to, and I want to visit, and I want to come back and have some beers here and enjoy the atmosphere.
Yeah. Preparing your building for the installation is a big portion. A lot of it is stuff that people have never moved before. You want to work with riggers, people that can move your equipment, that are going to know what they're doing. It's worth the money to hire riggers if you have some larger equipment, or get the proper equipment of maybe some forklifts and other things. You need to say the buffer for approvals, maintenance, and potential delays. As a supplier, we've done this, thousands of times. We've helped literally thousands of brewers open their breweries. So we're prepared for these things, and we can help you get prepared. But sometimes locally, you may have to find out, like, what is your local scene. If you're a small town in a small, you may have to give yourself a little more leeway to get some of those larger companies to come into your area than that.
Yeah. And this is one section that I just want to say something real quick, is that this is the spot where you can stress yourself out beyond belief.
Sure.
So that word, allowing a buffer, this is important, because setting a hard open date for yourself is one of those things that could really just, it can make you crazy. If you know that you're going to have a certain amount of time from the time you get your equipment to the time it's installed, then you need about a month to a month and a half to put together some beers because they need time to ferment. You can't necessarily set your start date for immediately thereafter because always some sort of delay is going to come into place. So
Sure.
when we get to the next slide, we'll talk about soft openings. I think that's a really great concept as well.
We got about 10 minutes left here, so let's try to cruise through this one here. But the soft opening, making sure that you give some of the local people who have been helping you along the way, give them a day to come in and see what you've been working so hard for. You don't need to have 12 beers. I actually think it's better to start off with a little bit less. This gives you the opportunity to maybe each Friday or each Saturday have a new tapping as time comes. Because if you kind of show all your cards at the very beginning and have 12 beers, and then you don't tap a new beer for a couple weeks to a couple months, that could be not as exciting for most people. That most people want to come in and have some new things coming at you there. There's some really nice comments I'm seeing on the side. I really appreciate the kind words that people are saying there. Getting into the grand opening too. Your investors and the other people you can get them here at the beginning. When you get them in, your grand opening, this is your first impression. Take what you've learned from that soft opening. Make sure that you're getting honest feedback. Make sure those people coming in, you say, tell me everything I did wrong and be honest with me. Because if they're not, you may not know what's going on until after you've opened, and they can help you, from getting some of those scars. Don?
Yeah, definitely important bits there. These are great methods to open the soft opening. Even if you have some guest taps, you're still making money off of those as well. So don't worry about that. You can slowly build up and take over those taps. Kind of our last little bit on the phase 4 here, we got, mug clubs and founders clubs. A lot of times getting the excitement of your community around you is a big deal. Mug clubs, certain states may have different rules on what you can and can't do. I've seen founders clubs where they've done everything from putting a person's name on a seat to having lockers for them on premise that they can utilize for their own stuff, so they can come straight from work, and also that they maybe are special privy to certain special releases that the standard public is not. So those are neat ideas. Beyond that, getting the repeating events, you see these all over. People running trivia nights. I don't know about goat yoga, but I'm sure that does exist. Drunk history lectures. There's so many ways to bring the integrated group together. And I think that a good marketing professional will have a lot of ideas for you there. Until you can afford one, you have to come up with the ideas yourself. I'm sorry. And then you have your yearly events, your special events, your Oktoberfest, your fundraisers and community involvement. There's many other things, but what I am seeing also is another trend that pops up is allotted space within your established maybe brew pub where you do special events. And that has turned out to be quite a moneymaker for folks if they're able to do that. It's not for every brewery, but quite a few of them are utilizing that.
Yeah, the events allow you to get really a lot more connected with your customer, especially if you are maybe a distribution brewery and you really don't do in-house, pub style. You can maybe take that production brewery, if you have the right licensing, you may be able to do something on a special event where now you get to actually have people in your production brewery to be able to say, okay, here's my founders or mug club members or whatnot, and have kind of a more intimate setting, getting that direct feedback. And so I think we'll give a few minutes here to some questions now. We have a link that I think I'm going to put in here, if I did that right. There you go. That you can get, how do I do? Stop closing there. There we go. Thank you. And we have,
The link will allow you to get a more detailed version of the setup that we have there. We have some links in there for some helpful resources as well. But yeah, anyone who wants that, please feel free to reach out to us for it.
Sure.
Well, guys, I think you've had some ringing endorsements of your content over here in the side chat. I really appreciate the holistic checklist. You know, obviously, as an equipment manufacturer and sales operation, you could have just looked at that focus, and I think it shows your dedication to making sure these people are successful from concept to execution. So, let's get into some questions. We have Chris asking, how do you determine if you have the right amount of traffic for a brewery?
Excellent. There's a Brewers Association and there's a lot of local guilds, and whatnot in states will kind of give you a good idea of what's in your area. You can't expect to have the same kind of traffic in San Francisco as you will in Wyoming. So you have to be really realistic about that. I think talking to some of the other brewers or seeing what the yearly production was from maybe the last few years. You can take 2020 and kind of throw that one out a little bit, but maybe the last 2 to 3 years, you could take those and average those out. And that should help you, maybe understand, hey, this many barrels. And then you can kind of break that down. Is my menu mix or sales, is it going to be by the pints or by the kegs? And so you're going to have to figure out what kind of traffic is that coming in for you in that regard. So it's a tough one, but I think locally it's going to be very and regionally different for people.
Anything to add to that, Don?
Just that if you're in a high traffic area, high metro area, there's certain assumptions that we can make based off of, people coming through, especially if you're offering food versus just a taproom model where it's beer only. We have some of those numbers that we work with regularly with people, and we can share those with you as well.
Great. Let's see. The next question is equipment financing. Say that I get the entire package from Stout, all shipping in one spot. Do your partners finance or lease on the whole kit, or do they limit the financing?
Actually, the lease to own is going to be majority for your equipment, and there is a certain amount of soft costs that can be thrown in there. It really just depends on your credit worthiness, but if you have great credit, then with regards to soft costs, usually they can add a certain percentage, whether that be 15% or 20%. That would be something to cover more in the way of any sort of shipping that's involved. Typically, if there's any overage, then it goes back to pay towards the balance of what you're borrowing. So,
yeah, the leasing has been a lot more common for that. It gives, I think, people a lot more options to take investor money and use that into the maybe the building facility itself, labor, ingredients, things that they're going to need some operating costs. And then the leasing companies tend to work well with allowing brewers to take that investment money and use it in different ways, and then keep the equipment maybe on a really fixed lot there for them.
Great. This is the question you guys have all been waiting for, actually. Greg is asking for an elevator pitch rundown of what products you offer, sizes, heat sources, etc.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, go ahead. It really kind of it determines. The building will determine what is the best size brewery for you, the best heat source, for you. So if you're talking to a reputable equipment manufacturer, what they're going to do is ask questions, make sure that they're fitting your needs, and dig a little bit deeper. I'd say 90% of the people I talk to, I'm usually talking them down in size, or working with, letting them, giving them options, and they tend to realize that they don't need as big of a brewery as they originally thought. Don?
Yeah, I mean, my little elevator pitch basically is just the concept that I could tell you everything I offer, and it can make your head spin. Mm-hmm. Or we could have a discussion and we can determine what's right for you. And that's the biggest thing. Yeah. We take the time to have that discussion with you.
Yeah,
that's great.
I feel free.
Aaron just posted up a link to connect with you guys later on down the road too for everybody. So
yeah, it's great to be here. I really appreciate you having us. We are passionate. Don and I are very passionate about helping brewers. So we're very, very, very privileged and excited to be here with you today.
Yes, thank you very much.
We appreciate the presentation. It was really great, and we might hit you up to write an article on that for us for the Nano Brewing column.
Sure thing. I'll have Aaron do that.
Believe it or not, we've hit our 30-minute time mark. That went really quick. I think that was a lot of great information. I really thank you guys. We didn't even sense that the storm was looming in the background with you guys about to lose power. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
So thank you to Don and Mike and Aaron monitoring the chat, and thank you to Stout Tanks for being a sponsor. We really appreciate it. And for everybody out there, tomorrow morning we start up again at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's 8 a.m. Pacific. So don't drink too many tonight if you're going to get up in Pacific time. To that note, I'm going to pop open a homebrewed Kolsch right now and celebrate the first day in the books. So,
Excellent.
all right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great weekend.
Take care.